Hello, this is Rosemary Matt. I'm the Director of Accountability for the New York State Education Department for the Adult Education Division. And today I'd like to share a little bit of information about our WIOA Title II programming. So our funding for adult education programming actually is a combination of both federal and state funding. So we have approximately $48 million in WIOA funding that is dedicated to adult education. Then we have state funding that comes from our governor's office. It's EPI, which is an acronym for Employment Preparation Education, so it's very much linked to the WIOA Title II funding, and that's about $83 million. Then we have AL, which is the Adult Literacy Education. That's about $9 million, and WEP, which is our Welfare Education Program. So all of these four funding sources work in concert to support all of our programs across the state. And we actually have a total of 172 programs that provide services in adult education throughout New York State. But in addition to that, there are some additional areas that are supported by WIOA Title II dollars. One of those areas is the Regional Adult Education Network, and some of you might be very familiar with our 7 RAIN centers. There are 7 geographic areas in New York State divided such that they can provide professional development and technical assistance to all of our 172 programs. And there is a RAIN director in each of those areas, and many of the RAIN directors serve on the WIOA committees that all of you are a part of. In addition to those situations, we have the National Reporting System Accountability, which is the contract under which I provide services and hold all of those 172 programs accountable, both for their performance outcomes as well as their fiscal outcomes. So we make certain in our Adult Student Information System and Technical Support Center, which is our management information system, that's called a SIS, and many of you are familiar with that, as that's our database that is used statewide for all adult education purposes. And all of our data, both from a fiscal standpoint as well as the performance of students, performance of programming, and our case management is all contained within the Adult Student Information System and Technical Support, which is a SIS. And that's that is funded under WIOA Title II. So that's part of the services that are provided to our programs across the state. So our WIOA Title II literacy program is actually divided into 4 component areas. And it was just recently competitively bid. So this is the first fiscal year 18-19, is the first of a 5-year contract that programs have entered into. We awarded programs in all 4 of these areas. In Program Area 1, that covers adult basic education, NRS levels 1 through 4, and adult secondary education, NRS levels 5 and 6. And what isn't up there is also ESL. That's the other area that falls under Program Area 1. Under Program Area 2, that many of you are very familiar with, that's relatively new to WIOA Title II. It's the Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education. That was, again, just recently awarded, and those programs are in full swing and beginning to operate across the state. Program Area 3 is intended for corrections education and other institutionalized education programs. Program Area 4 is different. Program Area 4 is the 56 literacy zones, which is a made in New York concept. So it's not something that you'll find in the legislation, but it's an opportunity for our programs. Actually, in order for a program to be eligible for a literacy zone, they had to have been awarded either Program Area 1 or Program Area 2 grant in order for them to be able to support a literacy zone. And a literacy zone targets a very limited area of a city or a town or a rural area where we identify those that are the hardest to serve individuals, those students that may not actually be able to be students until some of their most critical needs are satisfied. So we have case managers there at the literacy zones that help support these individuals, these adults, as they come into the program. They support a family concept such that the individuals are able to get the support from the community and from community partners so that they can be able to enroll in our classes and then ultimately succeed. As I mentioned, the four major components of our literacy programming, of course, the HSE, the high school equivalency diploma, is right up on top. That's the one that most folks are familiar with. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, it was the GED. We have since changed the test that's used for the diploma. It is now the TASC, which is the test of secondary education. And that high school diploma is part of the goals and credential outcomes that we look for from our students. We also, of course, have our ESL programming, English as a second language, and then our basic literacy, which is adult basic ed, as well as the adult secondary ed programming. Beneath all three of those areas are the career kits. Very recently, New York State Education Department partnered with CUNY, and we've created career kits in the 10 most liable to be employed areas across the state. And what that's done is given our teachers in all areas of programming an opportunity to invest in their classrooms, not just the academia that they typically would be involved with, but also connecting their students to career choices and building lessons around those career choices so the students are better acquainted with what might be available in those career areas, and yet they're also learning at the same time and preparing for that HSE diploma. To give you an idea of how many students we serve across the state annually, it's just over 100,000 students across New York State. We are a little top-heavy with ESL, as you can imagine, primarily from the downstate areas. 64% of our programming is ESL programming. The remaining 36% is the adult basic education. In the past 2 years, our measurable skill gain under WIOA has been 61%. Our goal, the goal that's set for us as a target by the National Reporting System, was 51%, so we've actually come in 10 points above the target that had been given to us. The measurable skill gain, and I want to make sure that that's understood, that includes not just the educational gain that is evidenced with a pre and a post test, but it also includes the HSE credential. That does count as measurable skill gain for our students. And an estimated 2,000 students annually achieve their HSE, their high school equivalency diploma. But it's important for everyone to note that even when we talk about the number of students that we provide services to, we do have threshold criteria that we must meet before the students are even counted. For example, they must have 12 contact hours and they must have a valid pretest. If that doesn't occur, then the students are not even counted on our national reporting system and we are not given credit for their enrollments. So it's important for our programs to understand that persistence is one of the factors that they are measured on, and they need to make certain that they're doing all things possible to ensure that their students remain in programming. The follow-up outcomes that are measured for all of our adult ed programs include, of course, first and foremost, employment. We must follow up on our students in the second quarter after exit, and at that time we also must assess their wages for a quarter so that we can report that information as well. And then in the fourth quarter after exit. Now currently we do have an arrangement, we have an MOU with the New York State Department of Labor such that for all students who have reported to us a Social Security number, we are actually able to data match with the unemployment insurance database so that we can see whether students are employed in the second quarter after exit and exactly what their wages are, and again in the fourth quarter after they exit our program. Excuse me. One thing that we have found, of course, is that not all students do have a Social Security number. Some who do have one may not choose to report it to us, so our programs are responsible for follow-up whether the student has given us a Social Security number or not. So if they don't have a Social Security number recorded in our database, then our programs are required to follow up manually with their students, again, in those same time frames. The high school equivalency diploma is a little bit different, and it's something that's very hard to wrap your arms around because the criteria seems to eliminate a good, significant number of our students who actually earn their high school equivalency diploma, but we are not able to count them. So, for example, you'll see that up on the screen. They must be from NRS levels 5 and 6. NRS levels 5 and 6 are those students that have scored in both math and reading a 9.0 grade equivalent or above. So it's very limiting as to how many of the diplomas we can actually count. A significant number of our students, in fact, just about double the amount that we are able to report, have actually scored below the NRS level 5, but we are not able to include them in this count of high school equivalency diplomas because they haven't met that criteria that is set under WIOA. Also, within that year after those students have exited our program, so they've been involved, they've been going to classes, they've been enrolled in the Adult Basic Ed program, they sit for the task test, they achieve a passing grade on all 5 subtests, they get their diploma, and they exit our program. We have to wait a year, within a year after those students exit our program, we have to follow them and make sure that they are either employed, or if they came to us employed, they would have to remain employed, or they have entered some training program or post-secondary education. So ultimately, it's a very small subset of students that we are able to count for follow-up outcomes, and it's very frustrating sometimes for our programs to know that there were a significant number of other students that did achieve their HSE, but under WIOA guidelines, we are not able to count them as a follow-up outcome. The credential attainment is something that we are just beginning to report this fiscal year. Fiscal year 18-19 is the first year that our federal office has required us to report the credential attainment. Most of that is going to be attributed to the IELCE, the Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education Programming, which is program area number 2. And those are credentials that have been prescribed in the RFP and in the proposals that were awarded, so that we know that those ESL students have concurrently attended both their literacy programming as well as a training option, and in that training option they did in fact earn a credential, and those credentials are counted a year after those students exit our programming. So that's a snippet of the information that circles around our WIOA Title II programming. Our New York State Director is Robert Perga, and his email address is up there on the screen, as well as my own in the lower right-hand corner. If you have any questions or would like to refer anybody to the programs that we've mentioned, please feel free to communicate with us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.